Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Hey, well, thank you, Sean, so much for that rousing invitation. It's always rousing with Sean. One of the interesting things, we have not been on the air for such a long time. Maybe work and life are getting in the way, but we've been having a lot of fun. And Sean, too, he was in England not too long ago. Here's a guy that said he never left the country, and now he's everywhere. But today we got a special guest that I met at Connections 2024. And the article popped out on the 9th of July. I got Mike Denson, game designer of Last 100 Yards, the series, available from GMT. Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's Denson. There's no I.
Denson. I'm sorry. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll most people here know I cannot speak English very well.
No, that's
So,
okay.
yeah. So, Mike, the first thing we always ask people, tell me about games that we know that you designed Last 100 Yards, but what got you into gaming? Usually, here's the trick question we always ask at the end. What game did you play, and at what age did you know that you were going to be a lifelong war gamer?
Well, let's see. Age. Probably in 1960. Oh, let's see. Probably 1963.
Wow.
And it was there was the old Avalon Hill, North Africa campaign.
Yeah.
Gettysburg. He had one more, and I can't remember what it was.
D-Day.
No, it wasn't D-Day. Can't remember now what it was, but anyway, yeah, it was we used to take, when we were a little bit younger, we would take 22 short hulls, 22 long rifle hulls,
Yeah.
17 caliber pellets, and 22 caliber pellets. And some was artillery, some was infantry, and whatever. And we'd go down to the corner store and get butcher paper and draw maps. It was really kind of like Risk. I'm going to move. I got 12 small pellets, and that's my infantry, and then I got elite, and I got artillery or air, whatever represented. But the first real game was probably I was 14.
Wow. And it was Africa Corps, which is an amazing game. And actually, you ever get nostalgic and you just want to buy one of the old games? I did that.
Not really.
Really?
No. I mean, I have a couple old ones left, but I'm one of those. I'm not much of a collector. I try to just keep those that I might play. And then I don't play any of them anyway, so I don't have time.
Yeah, I know. But you had time to invent Last 100 Yards. And
I did.
You told me an interesting story of how that came about.
Yeah.
And you got to share it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've played a lot of tactical games, mostly ASL and the old Tobruk game.
Yeah.
And, well, even before Tobruk was the Yakinto. Had the little tanks. What was it called?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway, I got it over there. I had to go look, but anyway, I like the tactical games. My favorite's operational, but I just played a lot of tactical games, and I moved back home, and I hadn't seen a cousin there in a long time. He's a few years younger than I am. He was in Vietnam, and he'd never seen a board game, but it was an opportunity to reconnect. So I said, well, I invited him over, and I said, well, we'll have a beer or two, and I'll show you how to play a game. And we tried a few games, and he really just rather drink beer, but he played. But he didn't really like operational or Civil War. He wanted to play a tactical game, and ASL was just way too much.
Yeah, it's a
So
cult.
I literally pull counters from one game and a map from another, and we started playing. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, I said, I got to start writing some of this down because I can't remember what it was. And you got a page or two, and then a month or so, you got 5 or 6 pages of notes, and you go through it again, and then you got more notes. So anyway, that's how I got started. That's why.
And that went to last 100 yards.
Yeah, we just played it on our own. I had a lady that does the art for the maps that we have currently. Back then, she just did the map for me. We had like 50 maps, so we could play, just the early version. The early version, you'd call it a beta. We played it all the time, and I never really intended to market it. I had or publish it or find a publisher. We just played here, but I had friends that kept encouraging me. So I called Dean Essig. I knew Dean from the old HomerCon. I mean,
Yeah.
He knew me. We weren't best friends by any means, but he was kind enough. I said, Dean, I got a game. I think I'd like for you to look at it because you're the only, you're probably my favorite designer. I really like OCS. And he said, well, if you'll come up, I'll look at it. And so I drove to Homer, Illinois. We sat in his kitchen for about a day and a half and played the game. And he gave me a thumbs up and said, well, don't let anybody change this or this. So, and then, a couple months later, I saw GMT warehouse event in Hartford or wherever it is in California. I called and said, well, I think I'm a designer. Can I come out? And the lady said, yeah, I could. So I flew out and walked in, and I asked who was the owner, and they pointed over there, and I said, well, what's his name? And so I went over there and made my proposal, and he said, it's a very, very crowded field or genre, I guess whatever aspect of the game. And
Yeah.
but anyway, I tried it with some of his friends there, and then a couple months later, I went to see Tony and oh God, the other partner, Mark Simonich.
Yeah,
And
Mark
they gave,
Simon. Yeah.
and about a month later, they gave me a thumbs up, and so there we go. That was
Wow.
probably 8, 9 years ago. I done lost track now.
I
6
think the
years.
first game came out in 2016.
Was it that far back?
It might be. I mean, because the first one was, um, yeah, I think it was. I don't. Wow.
I'll
Nope.
go. I'll go look.
Well,
Anyway, it
because you're
doesn't
on.
matter.
Yeah, you're on your second printing of a lot of these, and I heard a lot of great things about the series. And I think I told you when I saw you a few weeks ago, like I picked up the Solomon Islands one. It's funny,
Yeah.
I think that people, eh, maybe I'm crazy, but it's like, you know, I play a lot of the Euro theater games, and I'm like, oh, I'll just get with the Japanese because they were kind of, there's not a lot of games about them. But it seems like I'm looking over at the game collection, which everybody can see here, and they can't. And I have a ton of Pacific games, but the maps in that game are beautiful. The counters are great. I'm a sucker for great artwork, but it's one of those games where uh, I always thought the learning curve for that game, and I'm like, I'm gonna find somebody to teach me the game. And I feel bad. I was so busy at connections, I couldn't sit
Really?
down. Yeah, I know. Like, but I know Tom played the game, and nobody here knows who Tom is, and then the other one is Bill, and they love the game. So Tom's like, "Can you bring in your Solomon Islands game if you're not going to play it?" Yeah,
Well,
I
why
guess I'll.
don't we could set up a time on Vassal, and I'll teach you the game.
Yeah. But watching them and like, hey, Tom's a real, retired infantryman, and Bill's um, a longtime game designer. But every time I mention a game to him, he goes, "Yeah, I don't like it." which is fine. You play what you love. He really liked Last 100 Yards, and we were talking about this, when we were trying to set up Mike's thing. Like, he hates game with hexes in it, but he likes this game. So I'm gonna have to play it a little bit more, I think.
Yeah.
But what you know, I know what made this different from other tactical games. So when you were designing it, and for folks that have never played the game before, what's different about this than that cult known as ASL or other tactical games? Because it's a deep game.
Yeah. Well, you want to get me started, but so most of the tactical games, majority, are
Yeah,
weapon based.
correct.
Uh, it's well, how much you're going to penetrate, range, et cetera, and it's really based on machinery or weapons.
Right.
Not much is taken into account in regards to the behavior of the men behind those or in those weapons. So, I everything I I played games for so long and read a lot in history that I have a lot of empathy. I can feel, when I play American Civil War, after the early Avalon Hill stuff, I got in a lot of the SPI, and I could kind of see the Confederates or the Northerners racing across that wheat field. So uh, everything we did or I tried to do is we look at it through a lens of behavior. What's the behavior of the unit? Not just one man, but that unit. And so that's a big difference. The other thing was, I don't like you go, I go. That's not how life works. And
Never.
so I really, and I don't, game balance is good. But I really like to try and simulate, simultaneous. It's really an action reaction. Life is action reaction, especially anything lively like football, sports, or
Yeah.
war. Wherever there's an action, there's a reaction to it. If the enemy moves, I'm probably going to either move or fire at him. All right. If he fires at me, I'm probably going to fire back or move. But everything like that causes a reaction. And people think, oh, it's a firefight and it's just 45 minutes of continuous fire, just roaring continuous fire. Well, that's not how it's really like. You have these lulls in there. Okay. People are not machines. They're going to think and look for opportunities and advantages, and there's going to be lulls in the fire. So I hope I didn't get too far off track. But
No.
the other thing is that I don't like a lot of die rolling, and I wanted to keep it simple. So we came up with a system where, and I like to give it, it's hard to get a simultaneous feel playing a board game.
Oh yeah.
But with the action and reaction, and then you don't resolve any fire until after all your actions and reactions are done for all your units, then you resolve fire. You don't really get to see, you don't have as much control. The other different thing is that I found that in combat time, although time in reality is a constant, but under stress, it's sometimes a minute can seem like 10 minutes, and if you're not fighting, an hour can seem like a minute. So I wanted to use a variable time system. I never really liked, oh, it's going to end on turn 5. Well, that means I'm going to rush every guy I got, at the enemy position at the last moment. So this way, and I really wanted to, from an entry perspective, what it's like to be a company commander. He can't control that time. Tommy is late, Billy's wounded. He didn't step off when he needed, or he's waiting on some ammo.
Mm-hmm.
Those things happen. And so time, he can't control the time. From the other's perspective, you have these casualties. and I'm probably just wandering around here, not answering your question here where you
No,
wanted
you actually are. Um, because your game is that different. And what I noticed about it, it's that constant OODA loop. And I dig the Black Swan turnover mechanic
Yeah,
because it forces decision making where I'm not trying to. We all know these type of people, right? Uh, as you said, the game has to end on turn 5. So here I come, and
yeah.
I think with your mechanic, it kind of forces that quick decision making and the action reaction. I found from mostly watching folks play the game was very interesting because you're right. Board games are horrible at real time, but this game really kind of takes a step where look, it can't be perfect because it's when I go, you it's somebody has to act and then react, but it's as close as I see a board game come to it, and I thought that was really interesting. With the series, with the game I have, and then watching you quickly play it and show it, and then talking to everybody at work since we got back about the game. They go, well, we got to play it here a little bit more often, and I'm like, I got to bring it in and punch it, and that's going to happen pretty soon. I think
Right.
that's definitely it's pretty interesting. Um, it's it's kind of you know I kind of hit you with an unfair question. What's different about this game? And the easy answer is it's different. And playing a lot of tactical games because every once in a while I'll play a ton of them. But this game is that different than I would say other games I have. Um, is it a light game? You know, I have a hard time sometimes learning the rules from reading them. I'll have to punch it and play it and see exactly what they mean. And just like the ease of how it seemed as you were explaining it, I thought it was pretty interesting. Now,
Well,
looking at Genser, yep,
I, um, it, I think the biggest problem most gamers have, especially tactical gamers, if they play tactical games for a while, they've got a favorite. Okay. I mean, the mechanics in all of them are very consistent, very
right,
similar. But the barrier to entry is hard here because it's not like the others. Okay. And the biggest, a lot of times it's just, well, where's the opportunity fire? Where's the opportunity fire? Well, that's reaction, dude.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to shoot that guy. He's dashing between two buildings at 800 yards. I'm in range. I want to shoot at him. Okay. Well, uh, but that's not how it works here. You know, it
yeah,
it we only. That's another big difference is that in most tactical games, it's like you move a hex and you want to shoot. You move another hex. You want to shoot. Move another hex. Oh, it
I hate that by the way.
drives me batty. And so I just reduce, my units don't move as far. Most you can move is if your infantry is 3, and most of the time it's 2. So it works out to be the same. Okay. Maybe it takes me 2 moves or 2 game turns to equal, or maybe even 3 for some of what the other games allow you to move. Well, it's just, you can only shoot at that unit in the last hex he entered. In fact, when I acted, the other big difference is that we actually have formations here. You just don't willy-nilly act any squad anywhere, anyhow. You got platoons. You activate by platoons. And you have an opportunity to roll on a coordination table, for example, that allows you, that's a command thing. You were able to pull off a maneuver with 2 platoons. So that would you won coordination. So now that's a powerful thing in it. So I'm now moving 6 or 7 units instead of just 3. But you normally activate by platoon. And you take an action, whether it be move, fire, recover. You take an action with each unit gets an opportunity to take action. if he doesn't take an action in his activation segment, which only the player winning the initiative has an activation segment, and it's his first segment. Everything after that is a reaction segment until all that action and reaction for that platoon is done. Then you just pick another platoon and you just repeat the process. But so, from a company commander perspective, I think it and actually a tank commander in a tank, but more company commander, is that you got to manage your time, in which you can't control. If you get behind, you're willing to go take more risk. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
more risk means more casualties. Well, you just can't lose your whole company and be the last guy in the victory hex and win the game. There's limits on how many you can lose. The differential. If you get over that, you're done. But as long as the differential between your casualties and the other player's casualties is still within that range, if it's more in his side of the marker, then you can take more risk. But you've got to manage your casualties, you got to manage the time, and they're all variable. And the initiative is invariable. Everybody has initiative, but this one you have modifiers, so it's more of a momentum thing. You drove the ball down the field, and you're at the 10-yard line. You throw an interception in the end zone. That's deflating. So I want the player to feel that pressure that company commander might be dealing with. Shit, I'm behind schedule, or I'm ahead of schedule, but man, I've taken a lot of casualties. So now you have to look at through the whole game, more or less, and you can't control any of them, but you can try and manage it. So anyway,
and that is when watching, like I said, once again, looking through the rules, it captures that, where it's that quick decision making. And what I noticed too from watching, especially Tom play, it's like, you put yourself in a bad position, you're in a bad position. The game, if you make mistakes, it looks like the game is somewhat unforgiving because it's not all about the die rolls.
well, it's true, but it's generally, these are firefights. Now, some of the missions are larger, but most of them are firefights. You can have a long firefight, maybe an hour, but some of them are 30 minutes. Well, you don't have time to back up and restart. You
Right.
plan. You're that company commander. You plan your approach and attack, and you execute it. Because at a certain point you're going to lose because you didn't get it done in time, or you had too many casualties. So now some of the larger missions, but it's the same concept. You never, in real life, you don't have forever. You got so much time, you got to get the job done.
That's why I say every day I wake up, my man.
And we talked briefly about the reaction thing to make it clear. So if you're the active player, the platoon activation is you get an activation segment only by the player winning the initiative. And then after that, you alternate reactions until all those units of that platoon are done. Now, if you have a guy that, let's say you shoot at me, okay, well, one of my units can see you, but I have another unit back here, it's in the woods, he can't see you. Well, he's not going to react. If you win the initiative 2 or 4 times in a row, he'll sit there for 3 or 4 turns unless that leader goes back there and gets with him and brings him to the front. So positioning your leader and managing your position of your units is another really big difference between an experienced player or an experienced company commander and one that's not.
Yeah, and the game does that. So the first edition came out was Last 100 Yards, which is on its second printing now.
Yes.
And focuses on the fight in Western Europe with
mostly France.
With the Americans and of course the Germans. Then you came out with the Airborne,
Yes.
slowly moving over to the Solomons. That's where I jumped on the bandwagon,
Yeah.
and Russian front, and then now the for King and Country, which I might have to buy 1 and 2 so I can play that one because I think I mentioned this to you. I tend to like you know either I'm playing in the Pacific or I'm playing the British because I already know a lot of American history. So okay, got it. Yeah, maybe it's just trying to be different. Um, when you look at this, did any of this parts of the series, and I know number five's not out, did any of the way that those forces fight kind of test the mechanics of the game where you had to kind of think of, I didn't think about, you know, Russians fight differently than Americans. Do I have to change something in the game? As a designer, did any of them give you like an additional challenge where you looked at your core rules and say, huh, I wonder if I have to change anything?
Well, I I didn't. Yes, I wanted to. In fact, that's some of the most rewarding aspects of this design for me is that I've read enough and know enough history that I know that Germany, Britain, most of your Western European nations fight very similarly because
Hmm.
they've been fighting each other for centuries. Uh, but the Japanese fought different. The Russians fought different. Uh, they were one thing that was common is they were both willing to suffer high casualty rates in order to achieve an objective, but for different reasons. The Japanese, the Bushido Code. I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll die for the emperor. Where Russians was much more of a fear factor. Most of your infantry was ignorant. I'm not saying ignorant. They were illiterate
Yeah.
and weren't really capable of doing your fancy maneuvers. And plus, they didn't really have time to train them. So they used them as cannon fodder, more or less, pretty much like what you see in Ukraine today. So
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to try and represent the difference. In like ASL, well, so I guess you would call in game terms, you have a bonsai rules, in some of the tactical games, ASL specifically for the Japanese, where they charge, in the Russian, it's called a human
Berserker.
wave.
Yeah.
Well, it's the human waves, you have special rules, and they have to be in certain positions. And, I think a beauty of a game is if you can have is that you can design your game well enough that the player with whatever side he's playing will learn the strengths and the weaknesses of that particular force, and it will affect his play instead of trying to write a rule that's going to tell him how he has to play. So the Russians and the Japanese both are different in that they do not disrupt. Okay, they have a higher cohesion rating. Well, I used the values on these counters to achieve objectives, not necessarily say that, oh, that Russian is better cohesion or trained than the German is. Okay, so I'm going to give him a 7 cohesion. That's not why I gave him a 7 cohesion. Okay, I gave him a 7 cohesion to create a behavior. The behavior
Hmm.
is that he has a 7 cohesion, but he's only got a 0 firepower factor, where the Germans, for example, have a 1 firepower. So he can't duke it out with the Germans on a firepower perspective. So that player is going to realize pretty soon, well, my strength is in the assault because he's only got a 30% chance to ding me on a fire, and even if he does, I'll just drop the half squad and keep coming. It's not if you're disrupted, if that was a German and he got disrupted, well, he can't keep coming. So what the player playing the Russians and the Japanese both will find is that they want to assault the enemy. Now, they're both smart. You got good players. You're going to use the terrain. You're going to use smoke. You're going to use the other thing that allows your infantry to get close. But that's what they'll do. So it's just a matter of they play different than the Western forces. So,
They fought different.
well, they did fight different. And that's one of the things I'm really proud of, because I think, using a few numbers on a counter, I think it kind of represent you have to play like they play. That's their strength. And I'll give you another example. So, and this was one of our play testers in Moscow. We had 2 or 3 guys over there. They have a Moscow gaming club. And so this came from one of them. So, the Russian armor pretty much did like their infantry. They like to do frontal assaults and just overwhelm you with numbers and amongst you. They couldn't compete with the Germans at long range, with the optics and et cetera. So how do you create that behavior? Well, he suggested that, let's just reduce the range. So you have an equivalent gun, you have an 85 millimeter for the Russian on the T-34, and you got a Panzer IV with a 75. Panzer IV's got a range of 24. Well, I'm going to drop that 85 down to 18. Well, when you do, from a player behavior perspective, you being the Russians, what do you have to do? Do you not have to get close?
Right. Well, and you bring up an interesting point that I've talked to a lot of game designers about, and some games that I've worked on in the past. One in particular, the British are in the game, and the people, the Canadians fought differently. Yeah, I get that. Well, you don't have special rules to get them to fight differently. So it was a discussion I had with this person, like, do you know how they fought differently? Yeah. Why don't you play them differently? Because there are subtle things in the game that are different. And I just found it so interesting that players, they want a rule for everything. But when a game design can put that I'm going to call it a slick manner, I find that fascinating, because it's, games are a learning experience as well. And you you have to play it differently. And sometimes it's very subtle within not necessarily the rules, but the counter strings, um, that some players, they just don't get. And one of the things from looking at your game, because the one that you were playing was the European one, and then I pulled out my box as soon as I got home, looking at what's the difference, and I noticed this is not a firepower army, and it it shouldn't be a firepower army, just like you said. And I'm like, okay, so now I got this, and
Well, okay, so
I thought that was interesting.
let me comment on the firepower thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So my little story is that I'm going to give you a platoon of infantry, and you got a light, and you got a machine gun, and you're 100 yards away in a woodland. I got a squad of men, and we're an old stone farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can't assault me. You just have to shoot at me from the woodline.
Right.
You're 100 yards away. So how long is it going to take you to drive me out of that farmhouse?
Way too long.
Well, you may not have enough ammo. Okay.
Right.
You can only carry so many rounds. So the thing is that, soon as you start the assault, I'm going to raise up and give you a target. So then, so this game's about fire maneuver. It's not very bloody. You're not going to have kill stacks. Okay. I've played some missions and never lost a unit, because if you disrupt, you can't, you can't continue to move or charge. You have to recover. So, you're going to try and cover in the open. He's going to shoot your ass again. So a lot of times you disrupt, you fall back, you try and do it again. For other games, you have these kill stacks, and they just move around, and there's not, why assault this guy when I can just kill him with firepower? So that rarely happens in this game. If you're in a stone building now, that tank's firing at you, okay, at 100 or 100, 150 yards away. Now that's a different story. But just infantry and small arms fire, no.
Mhm.
So this is not a very, we had some people comment, well, this is not very bloody. But I did a lot of studies, my study, whatever you want to call it, looking at Dupai and some of his theories and casualties, and realized that, casualty rates there's some people get wiped out. But when you look at the overall casualties, you look at how many men landed on Normandy in that
Right.
first day or 2 days, and you say, my God, and then you look at how many it's killed, and you say, well, shit, man, that was like, was it a percentage or two? So, and especially today in World War II, they had better medical units, better corps, I know casualties is killed, wounded, and captured, but I'm just thinking more from a kill perspective. Anyway, yes, it's going to play different. You're going to have to figure out the strength of that. Really, it's just the Japanese and Russians that are different. The others are all pretty much the same. So,
Yeah, it's which I like about any game designer. He understands that, but doesn't need to redo their entire game just to give that experience to the player. I I like that, and from rereading the rule book since I got back, it's that there's some brilliance in the design, and looking at the series has been wildly successful because it is a crowded market. Um, but I think and just reading some of the reviews since I got back, because I was, folks out there probably don't know this. We were supposed to do this last week, but somebody was sick. It was great 4th of July. So reading some of the reviews, reading the rule book, getting you know the stuff out of the box, and probably start punching pretty soon. That there is some really different rules, mechanics, which leads to a different feel of a game. And as I mentioned before, I play a lot of Pacific based games just because, well, they're so rare, not in my collection. And I want to try Solomon Islands and compare it to old school tactical, compare it to, uh, uh, Academy games, the Guadalcanal game, just to see how they play differently. But I played those games. I do want to try it with this because it just seems like it's a different experience, and it's that decision making that you have to do. Also, the game looks like, and from watching you take people through, it doesn't take that long to play, which I think
no,
is
if the some of the smaller missions, you can play hour and a half if you both know how to play. Um, I always try to mix in some medium and some large missions because some people like the bigger ones. Um, but I kind of personally like all the what I would call the little tournament scenarios, tournament missions, the little small one, tight fights. Like mission number 1 in the very first module. It's still a classic. Shit, I use it every time when I teach somebody, and I still see people that really like it. It plays. I like to say, well, it plays the same way every time. I do set up the same way every time, but I've played it probably 80 times, and I know how I want to set up. But another thing too, in the defense, you you kind of have to have a defense in depth a lot of times too. So I would say that if you know something about tactics and you practice good tactics, you'll do well at this game. If you don't know much about it, or you do and just have and display poor tactics, you're not going to do well. Um, and it's got a lot of replay value because there's so many variables. I think
yeah.
this game what this game does best of all is create the chaos that one would see in any level of combat, but certainly at tactical level, is a lot of chaos. People complain, oh man, I ain't got, it's no way I can win. I can't win the initiative. Well, if you were one of, Marshall at the beginning of World War II, before the U.S. got involved, pretty much got with his people and says, all right, we're going to have to train our officers different. We're going to have to train them to deal with chaos. And if they can't deal with chaos, they're not going to be an officer in this army. And they began all their training and their things that they were doing to really try and put these young officers in those situations. And if you didn't pass muster, you didn't get to be an officer. So, and I see that sometimes in some of the players. They'll complain, man, I can't win the initiative. I can't win. Well, you're that company commander, and yeah, you right now you don't have the momentum and you're suppressed. Then you got to find a way to do it. So there are ways through reactions. You can, even if you don't have the initiative. But it's interesting. I find some of those that just kind of seem to want to throw their hands up. And then I see the others, that little light bulb goes off, and they say, well, if I do this, I can cause the enemy to react, allowing me to do that. So you find a way.
Yeah, it's just a lot of gamers. I've often said this, especially in this podcast. We'd have a perfect hobby if it wasn't for all the gamers at times. And the other one is, they're a very weird crowd. You can't make them all happy. But reading the reviews, I scoured not one bad review, and that is, it's rare that you could find games like that, or like on Board Game Geek when somebody like, no, you're playing it wrong, and it's just, it's interesting because everybody always compares every tactical game to ASL, and I always joke around like it's a cult. It's not really a game. When the rule book is bigger than you know my college physics book, there's a problem there. And watching a relatively rookie gamer, Tom, that he started to pick it up very quickly. He picks up rules really quickly, but very quickly with that game. And it's how fast can you get into the enjoyment. And I noticed that, and I kept passing by that, eh, folks enjoyed it. And once again, not to make fun of the somebody who's against hex tessellation, when he said, "Oh, I really like the game," and I'm like, "Whoa, never heard that before." Because you like what you like, but it's that good of a game where a relatively new player can fall in love with it, and a very seasoned player, where it's not their thing, also really likes it. So it goes to that broad appeal that I think the game has. And now, I think Sunday I'm gaming, but we're going to try a game called Arcs. But I want to get this to the table. I may have to do it at work. So hopefully by the time this comes out, we'll get it to the table that works.
Well, I think if you can spare an hour or two on Vassal, then it would be much easier for you to do this at work. Because it's not that complicated. It's just different than all the ones that you've done before. So really, it's just like a little loop. And once you understand how that little loop works, okay, then now, yeah, there's other rules. You add armor and you got a few things like that, but still armor, it can either still move, fire, recover. So it's just action like everything else. But if you're going to seriously try and find somebody at work, then let's set up a time, hour or two, and we'll play Vassal and I'll teach you the game. And then it'll be, once you understand how that works, then the rest of it will be much easier to do.
I was going to make you even a bigger pitch. Why don't you come by sometime if you're ever in the area?
Where are you?
Quantico, Virginia.
Oh man, I don't know. Being SC, I've been to DC over there in that area twice in my life, so maybe three times. So
Yeah.
I'd have to make a special trip. Maybe you could come
Well,
down here in Texas.
yeah. Yeah. It's I used to have family down there, in Dallas. So, but one of the the interesting things, about this series, it with the Brits coming out, it covers World War II really well. Is there any other few? Once again, we always ask for spoilers, but is there any other expansions you would just love to do in World War II, or move on to Korea? This would work really well in a Korea game, and there's so few squad based Korean War games. And then with the Japanese rules, looking at Vietnam, it's a very fungible rule system where I think anything in the bolt action to automatic rifle period, this game just works. Um, what is like a crazy idea you have of what this game should cover next?
Well, you know, designing the game is not a problem,
Yeah,
but after like, I don't remember when the first one came out, but I'm going 6, 7 years and
yeah,
trying to, take scenarios, develop them, get play testers. That's all the grind. So what I'm, I have a couple of teams. We'll see if they follow through. Some people have volunteered. So what they want to do, one group wants to do France 40. And then once they do France 40, they want to do early Russia. So I've got 2 or 3 guys that are supposedly working on those. Um, I have a team, I think, that said that they wanted to do uh, another Pacific. So, and really, most of the things that, besides the British, most after that will be mostly mission packs, new scenarios, etc. Uh, but I would like to move on doing something. I've been for the last 3 or 4 years wanting to try and do something else. I want to take, I want to take this engine and I want to bump it up to maybe a company or battalion level. Well, so a squad or single counter in this game might be a company or a battalion in a at a different scale. But I think it would do great in Vietnam. I think it would do great in Korea, uh, uh, and and it's just really just getting the help. I'm hoping that at some point that it's like ASL, you begin to get some third party people involved to do more missions.
yeah,
Um, not to say that I won't do another one, somewhere, sometime, but I'm hoping these other groups, teams follow through and, you know, they'll kind of take it to the next level. I'll be involved, but I'd like to work on this new project that I've been wanting to work on now for like 4 years. So,
I think the game would scale up very well.
well, okay. You you won't have any small arms fire range. Everything will be assault. Okay.
Hmm.
Because if you're looking at, a half to 1 kilometer per hex, if it is a scale, for example, uh, you have ranged, your armor, you're looking at maybe a 3 hex range, 1,500 meters on the average. Your artillery and your mortars, you're going to have range. Uh, but the action reaction piece is going to be different because it's really, you have to take into account radio.
Yeah,
So it's really a matter of, so, you'll have a battalion headquarters, a regimental, a divisional headquarters, and not all of them have the same capability. The battalion's mostly your combat unit. So um, if if I have a battalion commander or headquarters, then if one of my 3 companies gets attacked, I have the ability to probably react with the other 2. If it's regimental, there are some regimental assets that only the regimental headquarters could do. But they would basically, to keep it simple, I like to keep things simple. You give that regimental headquarters we'll call it a logistical command control number. Say it's a 7. And if you roll less than a 7, then maybe he can send you or provide you support from, a 105 battery or from whatever. And then division, you have a different assets. Same concept, but divisional, maybe you have an anti-tank unit. You have obviously artillery that you can provide support. You may have engineers or recons. You have other stuff and so they're all support, but that battalion's not going to get that support unless so you have that. It represents not just the time it takes to put that reaction in place to send that battalion or to send that anti-tank battery or whatever. So you just control it with a die roll, and if the leader didn't pass, then it didn't get done in the time allotted. So so that's where the reaction, and that you're not going to get to move everything just when you want to.
Just like in real life.
Yeah. And so,
well, that sounds interesting, though.
Yeah, that's kind of, I just need to find time to do it, and I'm hoping to wrap this British module up. I've had a lot of people, contribute the design. Okay. Actually, an Army officer did all of the missions for the Pacific. He worked them up, sent them to me, and we massaged them and made them work. But he did all that, and I've got some guys now doing a lot of the British design. But it's the easy part to sketch out what you want to happen. It's not. The harder part is taking it and developing it and having a finished product. So that takes time. I tried to calculate one time how many man hours it took to do a mission. When you take into account somebody's going to spend the time to think about it, come up with an idea, put it on paper, and massage it, and then you got to play it 2 or 3 times, and then you send it out to play testers. You may be looking at 30 hours, maybe not just one person, but to get it done, you may look at 25 to 30 hours just per mission.
And it's not anybody's full-time job. So
no, everybody's volunteering. I'm going to say something right now, man.
Yeah.
I have been very fortunate with the people like Mark Beto and Bill Quose and Rick Reinish, and many others that have contributed and worked for this game. Mark Beto runs the ladder for the last 100 yards. Bill Quose has been instrumental. He's kind of like my muse. Bill served in Vietnam. And a big war gamer. And Rick Reinish, I've known Rick Reinish runs the Austin ASL tournament once a year. They draw about 60 ASL players generally. And he's another muse. We worked really close early on. I like to run things by people.
I know so many people, and like, oh, I want to do a module for the game, and they think it's easy, and it's
No.
really not, because people don't understand the amount of, first of all, the scenarios. Even though maps on most tactical games don't represent the actual terrain it was fought on, because you have many different missions, they got to use similar maps, but you still got to get it right. And from working with so many designers on that part of getting their games, hopefully, well, in some cases, all the way to getting printed on somebody's table, they don't realize the amount of work you have to do. And I think I mentioned to you my whole theory on playtesting, because
Okay.
people always ask me how much playtesting is enough. And my answer always is you can never do enough play testing. And it gets easier because you know the rules. But then sometimes, like you played Bellewood with Bill, or he showed you the game, right?
Yes.
And we had a playtest session Monday. And I'm like, you see, when I was reading your rules over the weekend, I started to get inside your head because I know what you mean here. And I it's one of those things where I'm playing it how I know you want me to play it, not reading the rules. So like having somebody sit down and who's never played it and go over the rules step by step. Okay, well I did it. All right, well do it again. Is it broken? And it's people just don't understand the amount of work. And those are the guys that usually will go online on some forum somewhere and complain that every game sucks and they can do a better one. And I always tell them, give it a shot. And they go, it's hard. It's a lot of work. No kidding. And to get it right, it is a ton of work. And that's why, the games that make it to production, that make it to a gamer's table, they don't understand the amount of work that goes into it. And that's why, respect the really good designers because they had to take their game all the way from a friend coming to your house drinking beer. I was going to ask what beer it was, but you know, um, to going to it, the GMT open house and saying you need to, check this game out. People don't understand that that's not where the process ended. That's where it almost started in earnest, right? And it how many years did it take you from that your friend visiting you that day to the game was out for sale?
Probably
Couple of
uh,
years, I bet, right?
3, 4, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe
Eh,
5.
yeah, which is about average.
Well,
And
I'm not
then
typical. Most people sit out and say, I want to design a game, and they pick a topic and they research it and they study it and they design a game. Uh, mine didn't happen that way. And I don't know any other way. I don't know
yeah,
any other way because mine just was accumulation of 60 years of wargaming, and what I thought would really occur on the battlefield. Not, you know, he, self-preservation. I think I mentioned this the other day,
yeah,
well, I got a range, I can shoot this machine gun shoots 800 yards. And so, I'm going to start shooting at you at 800 yards. Well, in real life, okay, I could shoot at you at 800 yards, but the odds of me causing any casualties or really doing a lot of harm are probably not very good. But on the downside, what I've done now is given up my position. And so I can, if you on the other side or any decent officer, you're not going to submit your men to charge this freaking machine gun. You're most likely going to either maneuver against it, number one, but more importantly, you're going to probably get on the radio and you're going to have your little mortar unit take out this machine gun. Okay.
yeah,
So what in real life, I'm in a foxhole, it's 50 yards over there to the next two guys. And I got a pretty big pucker factor, and these guys are coming at me. And so I want them within 75 yards so that I can, they're not going to have time to respond and call that shit on me. The- You know, so yes. Now, if I'm suppressing the enemy, I'm trying to advance, yeah, I'll fire 800 yards. Okay. Because I'm trying to maneuver, I want him to keep his head down. But if I'm on defense, I won't, I don't want to miss.
yeah,
I mean, so those are things that we try and think about, um, when we've in the design of the game. Well, when I say in the design, I didn't plan it that way, but those are the thoughts that I had that I thought what would how can we do that with cardboard counters?
Yeah.
How can we do that with cardboard counters? How can I avoid the kill stack? Well, there's no kill stacks here. I mean, um, and another thing different we asked earlier, I'll regress, is that we use these fire markers to represent the volume of fire, be it small arms or anti-tank or indirect fire, and they all have different properties depending on what type of fire, the different levels of suppression. So I find that this game is a gamer's game. If you have some understanding of tactics I would always thought that military guys that's been in the service would really appreciate it because I think it emulates things that you have to do to be successful and survive in combat. You got to use your cover, you got to suppress the enemy, you got to maneuver, and you got to have a lot of luck.
One dirty little secret I'll tell you, and let's keep it between us. Military guys that have been trained to do it in real life are the worst gamers ever. And it's okay. There are plenty of there are plenty of exceptions. So I don't want to embarrass anybody out there, but when you take like a graduated company commander, because you had a guy that was a company commander in Fallujah play your game, and when I played him in Mark Walker's Vietnam '65, squad battles,
Yeah.
the most timid Marine ever. And I'm like, I see what you're doing there. You're trying to get a base of fire, getting me to expose myself. Like, you're using really good tactics against an enemy that is very, I was definitely scattered among the board. I also knew that you had to come at me to win. And you did it, it's like that scene in Men in Black, when the guy shoots, they're testing all those guys to become agents. And he goes, "Thank you, gentlemen. You definitely are the product of years of government training." And you watch guys play that, and it's like, yeah, they don't realize where the game sometimes is abstracted and where sometimes it isn't. But the end result is it's, lean into the game and play it, and you'll realize it does emulate what you know a lot more than you think. But I've seen guys like play, and this is big in miniatures. They are horrible at it because there's no phase lines, right? There's no the random radio calls. There's no check-ins. It is you want air. It's not a 7-minute process. It is a die roll that takes less than 2 seconds. And it is just funny to watch them play it. That's why I don't play air games. Because I'm horrible at them.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, and a lot of air games are just getting the guy 6 and gun him down.
Sure.
Right? Easy enough. That's what the designer wants to. That's the experience the designer wants to give me. But I'm thinking, nah, I need to put this in place and that in place. I I, I do play some air games, but I look at it where, yeah, I have to look at to see what in the game is abstracted, and
Right.
then I'm also there to have a good time. But I've watched guys throw dice at tournaments that upset because no one's going to go back to your unit and say, I don't want to surf under this guy because he got all his dudes killed at a tournament. It's never going to
Mhm.
happen. But
Right.
it's sometimes funny. Some of them are really good at it. And I'd say it's the player more so than the rules or the game system. It's next time you're at a tournament for your game, watch like some people that aren't used to your system and watch how frustrated they get. I don't know about you. I love seeing it because it is, you got to have passion to get that mad at cardboard counters and plastic dice. So that's what I always tell people. Like, I don't understand. I I had all my artillery, my smoke, this and that. It didn't work. I go, yeah, in real life it would have worked. This is somewhat of a game. And then taking him
What
out of
happened?
that abstraction. But like I said, I have to run games for military people. And some of them are, especially at the tactical level where I know they know this stuff, they are, yeah, they make these really crazy decisions. And, watching a group of Marine Corps General Commanders, War College guys play a game, and the ones that didn't really understand the historical background were so much better than everybody else.
Interesting.
And yeah, and this was just a few weeks ago, and watching them in this big hall playing, it's a horrible game. I'm not going to mention it. It's the invasion of France in '44, and you could tell the ones that knew the history, but you had a lot of foreign students that weren't raised on American history, and they were just doing so much better because I know what these units can do, and it's funny the bias gamers have that they don't even realize
Right.
that they have. Like I mentioned, Avalon Hill's D-Day, and maybe it's because of the mechanics, but you have to pick that landing zone where you're going to invade France in the beginning. And I played that
Mhm.
game dozens of times as a
Right.
teenager. 9 times out of 10, I picked Normandy because I am totally biased by the history. And you know what I started doing years and years ago? I said, I'm here to have a good time. I understand the rules. I understand the capabilities that are portrayed in this game. And I size up my opponent and I go, he's not going to think I'm going to attack the Pas de Calais. Well, I guess he'll find out turn one. And it's that fun aspect of it too. That
Mhm.
it's kind of what makes our hobby so much fun.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's the problem solving for me. You know,
Yeah,
it's all, problem solving, and the more you play and you're a good gamer, it doesn't take you long to size up, okay, this is the best plan of action, or size up and you have a plan of action. It
yeah,
may not always work out. Um, you can't control what's reflected in the die rolls by how well your units fight. Uh,
yeah,
but you had a good plan of action, but for whatever reason, that tiger showed up just at the wrong time, and you didn't account for that tiger. So, uh,
yeah. Many years ago, when I used to actually like playing Flames of War, I just don't play it that much anymore. That I tabled a guy in 3 turns, and he was not happy, this and that. And he goes, well, I mean, the guy was in the military. He's referring to me. So, of course, he knows how to do all this, right? And then the guy, the TO that was running it goes, yeah, but he was in the Air Force. It had nothing to do with what this game was about. World War II, infantry and tanks. It's it's knowing and understanding the rules and just having a good time because it took forever for this guy to make a move. And I'm
mm,
like, yeah, I'm not even paying attention to him because you never stop your enemy when they're making a mistake. And it's like, well, he was trained to do that. Well, honestly, no, I never was. Plus, I wasn't in World War II. I'm old, but I'm not that old. So
right.
it's about having a good time. And yeah, well, I'm just trying to, usually our people fall asleep after an hour, but we've been on over an hour. I told you
Uh,
it wouldn't take long,
Good. Well,
but
I've certainly enjoyed it. I appreciate you taking the time.
no, look, I'm sorry we couldn't do it last week, but I've been hacking through it.
Oh,
Eh,
and no
Yeah,
problem whatsoever. It worked out fine, and I'm sorry it took me 20 minutes to figure out what I did wrong or fix it
no,
anyway.
don't
So,
worry about it. The if we would have done it last week when I was hacking up every 2 minutes, they would have started sending get well cards to the house
yeah,
or sending something like "I'm very sorry for your loss" because it seemed like I was going to die. But
yeah.
I definitely want to have you back on, and some of the folks that are working on the British version. Why don't you have you and those guys come back and let's talk about that? Because I think
Sure.
more people should play this game.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
but we'll.
be glad to be in the they can come in. The game is
Yeah,
we can play.
yeah, most certainly. And I know it's right now it's on P500, the British one, but you can get most of the other games at gntgames.com. Just search for Last 100 Yards. If you think everything we talked about in the last hour plus is BS, just go to Board Game Geek and check out some of the reviews. The great thing about a lot of board games, you can download the rules. Check out the rules. I'm going to give everybody some advice with that is check in your brain, get rid of every other game you've ever played, and then read the rules. Because
Well,
I did that. Huh?
certainly tactical games. Okay. I don't know that
Yeah.
strategic is going to be applicable, but no, it's not like any of the other games. It's different and it's based on more of a behavioral aspect. And
Yeah.
so it's
It's definitely a game that I'm going to start playing a lot more. And by the
well, if
time
you
you
want to-
answer,
yeah, let's set up a time to play on Vassal and it will help you tremendously. And then we can we'll do that sometime.
I look forward to it, and I'm going to turn it back to Sean in the studio.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.